Stand by. Okay, I believe I got the stream started. Now I'm going to start the recording for this session. Record on this computer.
So did I cover pretty much everything, Dan?
Yeah, did a good job.
Thanks.
All righty. Welcome everybody to the Virtual Christmas Summit 2021, brought to you by Boscalia Studios. This presentation is sponsored by Wired Watts. Please don't unmute or interrupt the presenter. Feel free to put any questions or comments in the chat. We'd like to welcome back Rick Harris and Dan Culp. And today, in this session, we're going to be talking about the FPP Scheduler. So, Rick, feel free to start.
All righty. The last class was a tough one to get by in the time. This one, we're going to have a little more time, so it's not as complex. So we're going to go over the FPP Scheduler. My name's Rick Harris. I live in Meridian, Idaho. I've been doing animated lighting for 4 years. I'm the author of the FPP manual in conjunction with Mark Amber, and I conduct year-round testing and quality control for FPP. The presentation is on FPP Scheduler and how to set up a schedule. By creating a schedule, you can automate your show that once it gets configured, you don't need to touch it again. Some of the things that a schedule can do is to start on a specific holiday, even if that holiday doesn't fall on the same day of the year. You can have multiple shows on the same day, such as a pre-show, your main show, then an after-hours show. You can have a different show every night of the week, which might be good for people that have a lot of songs or want to have theme-based by day. The schedule has a functionality to determine sunrise and sunset, so you can coordinate your show to automatically start and stop in conjunction with dusk and dawn. But a schedule is just that. It schedules your playlist. So you have to have playlists created in order to have something to schedule. We'll go over most of the playlist details and cover how a playlist works. A very important item is that in order for the scheduler to work, it has to have an accurate way to keep the current time. The easiest way is to configure your FPP device to have an internet connectivity and to use NTP to keep accurate time. Before we go into the scheduler, we're going to need to discuss playlists, since the scheduler basically starts and stops playlists. A playlist is nothing but an ordered list of items to play, and they're not always just sequences. Think of it as a step-by-step instruction on how you want your show to play. Some of the more common playlist types are sequences, which are sequence and media, or just the sequence only. This is the most common playlist entry type. But you're not limited to just that. You can have an FPP command, and we'll go into that in a little bit. They're very powerful and create a lot of versatility. You can have a script inside the playlist to perform some more advanced functionality in your show. You can just play media, video or audio files as a playlist item. You can even have a playlist within a playlist, and I'll go into that a little bit. So the playlist editor is where you'll create each of your playlists, and it's very common to have several different playlists that you use throughout your show. The first section is where you'll either select the playlist that you want to edit or create a new playlist. Don't use special characters or an excessively long playlist name. That can sometimes cause problems. Once your playlist has been created or selected, you'll see the selected playlist in the details section below. In this section, you can include a description if you want to include more information on what your playlist is used for, and you can select the randomize option for your playlist. The random options are off, every iteration, or once per load. The way the randomize works is if you have the every iteration option, it'll randomly select the next playlist item from the entire playlist that you have, and each song, and then once a song is played, then it will go back and play, re-randomize the list. Selecting the once per load, it's going to randomize the playlist when the playlist loads, and then it'll play through that playlist Once the playlist is complete, then it'll reload the list again with the new random order. So if you have every iteration, there's a possibility that you could get a song to play back to back because it's going to random each time. But the once per load, it loads it, and then it basically keeps track of what was played. So in this section, you can also see the details of how long your playlist is going to run. The lower section is where you'll add or edit the individual playlist items. A playlist most commonly will have a sequence type of sequence and media, which is the FSEQ file that was rendered in your sequencing software and the associated media file. But there's a myriad of playlist entries that we'll go into. So a playlist is broken down. Sorry about that. The playlist is broken down into 3 sections. Each section will function exactly the same in regards to the items in the list. What is different is how each section is played. The lead-in section will only play one time when the playlist is first started, even if you have the playlist set to repeat immediately. This is useful if you have some sort of startup processes that you want to trigger before your actual show. If you have one of the timed interval repeat options selected, then the lead-in section will play each time your timed interval repeats. And I'll explain that in a little bit. In this example, I have a couple scripts and a playlist. And yes, like I mentioned, you can have a playlist within a playlist. In this lead-in, I run the script to turn on the remote Falcon. Then I display the local weather. And then I have a playlist that's a countdown up until when my show starts. Some of the other common things that people have used in the lead-in section are things like turning on a projector or turning off porch lights and other various things using home automation, or turn fans for blow-up props in the yard, or turn on power to various devices like maybe even router or power supplies, or even different FPP devices itself. That's just a few of the things that we can add in the lead-in. And any playlist item can be in the lead-in. The main playlist section is your main show. All the items in this section will play at least one time unless you interrupt it by some other means, such as a stop strategy that would interrupt it, or a higher priority playlist that is scheduled to start before the current playlist is completed. The main playlist section is the only section that gets repeated when the repeat option is selected in the scheduler. The lead out section is very similar to the lead in section, and it can be used to terminate your startup processes or display some sort of goodbye sequences or messages. If your stop strategy is set to hard stop, then it's not going to play the lead out. If you have one of the timed interval repeat options, like playing it at the top of every hour, then the lead out section will play each time your timed interval repeats, just the same as the lead in section. What makes the FPP Scheduler so robust are the playlist entry types that it supports. There are so many creative things that can be done in a playlist, and it's really only limited by your imagination. Here are the playlist types and an explanation of how they function. Sequence and media. That's the most common type of playlist item, and it's what you use for your musical sequence. Dynamic. This entry is for playlist items that are created from an outside script or plugin, and it allows for playlist items to be played basically on the fly. In using this item, you can point to the location to retrieve the next playlist item. Branch. The branch playlist item is very powerful. It allows you to make changes based on certain criteria. Some popular uses for the branch type is to turn the volume and or brightness down depending on the time of day. Some people will have a gradual reduction in the volume or brightness when it gets later in the night. And it's also been used to skip songs tailored towards children after a certain time. Some people will, only play the children's songs up to a certain time and then not play those after a certain hour. So in this example, I have a branch, and you see that if the time is after 2200 hours, you're going to skip the next 3 songs. So if there's a playlist loops through, if it's after 2200 hours, it's going to skip the hippo into the unknown in that time of year and go straight to Papa Mama Loca Pipa, just as an example. So you can go through and skip songs based on a time. FPP command type. You can use FPP commands to be used within a playlist. There's way more commands than there's time to go over to explain, but some of the more popular FPP commands are brightness. You can change the overall brightness. GPIO, you can turn on or off the GPIO pins, useful for things like triggering relays to turn on or off. You can start or stop effects on certain models. You can run scripts to activate functionality. There's dozens of others. An image, you can have an image playlist item. One of the developers has a small TV that he uses as a virtual picture frame and has it transition through several family pictures during the day, and then at night it'll do something else. Media only. This will play just a media like a music or video file. Pause. This can be used if you need a slight pause before the next playlist item starts, or if you just want to create a blank in there, like maybe you want to wait for a blow up to fill or something similar. Playlist, and like I mentioned, you can actually insert a predefined playlist as a playlist item. This could be useful if you have several playlist items that you want to use in the lead in or lead out sections on all of your playlists. Just create the playlist and insert it accordingly. So if you have a preset intro, like a countdown sequence where you have several sequences or something like that, you can create the playlist and then just enter it in there. And then if you change that entry, you just change your intro playlist. Sometimes you might have a song that's combined together. Like, for example, I have a military tribute where I do an intro, a voiceover at the beginning, and then I have the actual song. And I'll include those in one playlist so it actually always goes together. So that's an option where you can use a playlist. You've got remap. This will allow you to remap channels to different channel numbers. There's many uses for this, but this one of the common things that's useful if you need to move a prop to another controller port and you can't rebuild the sequence. So you won't have to go in and rebuild, re-render, and do all that. You can just remap those pixel channels to a different port. You can have a script item. And like I mentioned, scripts are small programs that you can run to do a myriad of things. There's several prepackaged scripts in the script repository browser, and you can write your own. Sequence only. This is used if you have an animation type sequence, and it's often used for after-hour static light displays, or if you want to just have flashing lights that's not associated with music. A URL type. This is similar to the dynamic item, but you can either get or post to a URL. So you could actually, if you have a website, you could use this to update your website to show what's currently playing. But there's a lot more options. It basically will handle a get or post to or from a URL. So some common scheduler usages is everyone has their own opinion on how they want to run their show. Each show is unique, and so is everybody's idea of how they want a show to look. So one scheduling method might be great for one show, but not for your show. The best schedule for your show is the one that you like. Everyone has different likes and dislikes. I'll give you some of the more common methods that are commonly used, but none of these are a recommendation, just an idea as to what is possible and give you some thoughts on how you might want to configure your show. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of different scheduling usages besides this, so this is nowhere near the limitations. Having one schedule every day throughout the year is obviously the easiest. Your show starts and stops at the same time every day, plays the same songs in the same order each night. There's a lot of people that use this, and it works quite well. Another one is where people have a different show on the weekends. They'll have different end times on the weekends, yeah, a different show, and during the week it's a little bit different. Different end times on the weekend. Some people will have where they stop the show at an earlier time during the week so it doesn't disturb their neighbors, but on the weekend they'll have the end times go later. So that's another option. A different show each night. Some people have a lot of songs and they'll play a different set of songs each night. So, you know, if you have 40, 50 songs, you might want to break it down into each night playing a different set of, you know, 5 or 10 songs. Or sometimes people will actually have a theme. Like one night they'll have like a movie theme, and another one a kids theme, and another night, you know, religious songs, or another night funny songs. So it just depends on what you want to do. Some people will run the same show every night, except on one special night like Christmas Day or New Year's Eve, they'll have a unique show for just that one day. Some people will play a short show with just static lights or something else in between shows and have the show start at the top of the hour or top of the half hour or something like that. One thing that for people that are considering this, it's a common request, but think about your viewers. As an example, my family's been going out looking at Christmas lights ever since I was a kid, and I take my kids and grandkids out, and we don't plan our viewing. We just go out and drive. If we come up to a house that just has static lights or some other basic display, we look at it for a second and move on because we don't know if it has a show or not. So if you're wanting to attract people to see your show, running a show that has breaks in it might not be the best for you, but that's something that you have to decide. Some people will create a schedule for the entire year to include landscape lights and everything, and then after that they're done. They don't change the schedule from year to year. They'll just change their sequences. So once you get the scheduler established, you don't have to change it unless something comes up that you want to change it. Many people use a combination of these, so you're not limited in what I have mentioned. It's pretty much the sky's the limit what you want to do. So this is a scheduler entry, and this is what a basic schedule might look like. It'll have a start date, as you see, an end date, and you can see you can also select a holiday by name. It's over here, you select Thanksgiving, and like I mentioned, you have to have your locale set. So in the days configuration, you can select a whole bunch of different options. You can select an individual day for each one to start. They have some more common day combinations like Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So some of the more common ones are there. You have odd and even. Odd and even confuses some people because they think it's odd or even based on the calendar of the month, but that's not. And the reason not is that you could have, by running odd even, you could have odd days at the end of the month, and the next day is going to be odd as well, and you'd have the same show back to back. It's odd and even basically from the day count from when FPP was created. This way you'll create a true alternating schedule. So odd and even won't exactly fall odd and even on the calendar. And then if nothing there matches what you want, you could do day masking. With day mask, you could select every individual one that you want to select. So the playlist, as you can see here on the day mask, I have on this one Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And the next one is alternating. The playlist is pretty straightforward. You just select what playlist that you want to play. The runtime is another thing that has some neat functions. You can set your show start and stop time to be anytime you want. When you select the drop down box has the time in 30-minute increments. but you can type in the time you want up to the second. You can select that. If you want your show to continue past midnight into the next day, FPP is smart enough to handle that. You just enter the start and stop times, and FPP will know how to handle it. So if you, no, I didn't have one on there. I should have had one in there. So it also has a sunrise and sunset option. And with that, you can select an offset, because depending on your latitude and longitude, when it gets dark is going to be different. So you can set an offset. You could go either positive or negative so that it matches roughly when it gets dark or before the sun comes up. For me, it works about 20 minutes after sunset is when it gets sufficiently dark. If you want a show to play 24 hours, you select a start time of 0000 and an end time of 24:00:00. And that'll basically be playing 24/7 if you power it up. As soon as it initializes the boot up sequence, your FPP will start playing that sequence. So the repeat interval and stop type are a little more complex. We'll get into that. So you have the stop and repeat strategy. The stop and repeat strategy, it's fairly straightforward if you just have one schedule, but once you add other schedules, it's important that you understand how these settings can affect your show. The stop strategy dictates how you want your show to stop when it reaches the end of the schedule time. It doesn't necessarily stop right at the time. You're going to dictate how it's going to stop after it gets to that time. The repeat option determines what the show should do if it's completed the main playlist and there's still time left in the schedule. So they work in conjunction with each other, but depending on how you have it set up, you can make it so that your schedule won't start when you think it should. And then the priority scheduling honors your start and stop, your stop and repeat strategy. So we'll start with the stop type. There are 3 stop types. The hard stop is basically that. It will stop your show at the designated time. If you tell your show to stop at 10 p.m., right at 10 p.m., it stops. If it's in the middle of a song, that song stops right then. If you have a lead out, your lead out section will not play. So if you have things in your lead out, like to turn things off or whatever, it's not going to play. But a hard stop can be used for timing critical schedules, so that if you make sure something starts right on time and you want to just terminate, then you can do it. Then you have the graceful stop. The graceful stop strategy is is when your scheduled end time is reached, if there's a song that's playing, FPP will complete just that one song, then it'll go to your lead out section. Keep in mind that means that your show will not end at the exact time you specified. This is important to remember when we go to the repeat options in the next slide. If you select the graceful loop stop strategy, then when the scheduled end time is reached, FPP will continue to play the rest of the songs that are remaining in your playlist and then play your lead out. So if your playlist has 10 songs in it and it's currently playing the second song when the scheduled end time is reached, it will complete the song that's playing and then play the remaining 8 songs in your playlist and then play the lead out. So the actual end time that your show ends could be significantly after your scheduled stop time. So then we get into the repeat interval. The repeat option is only going to repeat what's in the main playlist section. You see here in this section here, that main playlist. That's the only section that normally gets repeated based on your repeat option. The repeat option determines what the show should do if it's reached the end of the playlist. So once it got Text Me Merry Christmas, if there's still time left in the show, what do we do at this point? So if you have the repeat interval set to none, then it's going to play down, get to Text Me Merry Christmas. Even if your schedule is set to play for another 2 hours, it's going to do your lead out and be done. It's only going to go through this list one time. With the repeat interval set to immediate, I'm going to do the same thing. Gets to the end of the list, Text Me Merry Christmas. If there's still time left, even if it's 1 minute, it's going to start back over, go up to 12 days, and start playing that sequence. And then it'll honor whatever your stop strategy was once it gets to the end time. With the repeat interval set to a set interval, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, this will start in increments of whatever time. So say you have your show start at 6 o'clock. If it gets to the end and you have your stop time set for sometime after this, then it's going to start. If you select the 60-minute interval, it will start the next iteration right at that increment. So it'll start your show at the top of every hour. If you have 30 minutes, it'll start at the top and bottom, and that's as long as it doesn't complete the list. If you have it set to, like, say, top of the hour, and it goes through and there's still time left, but the end time ends before, it's not going to play it again. It'll honor what you have set up. So schedule starting issues, stop strategies, and the repeat modes. One of the things that causes some grief in a show is when your schedule doesn't start like you think it should, but this is often caused by the way that you schedule your show, and a lot of it boils down to how FPP handles the starting of a schedule. In an overly simplified explanation of how FPP handles schedules, the FPP device will look at the time. If a schedule is supposed to start, it starts it, and if it's supposed to stop, it stops it. But in order to make for more pleasing shows and versatility, developers have added things like the graceful loop stops, priority scheduling, and various other options. But in doing so, they had to create a sort of rules on how to handle things that are not so cut and dry. So for now, we're going to forget about priority scheduling for a minute. The basic rule is that a schedule is triggered to start when the start time is reached and there are no other schedules playing. But what many people don't think about is that even though your schedule might have a scheduled end time of 10 o'clock, if you have any of the graceful end strategies and or a lead out section, then your actual end time is going to be significantly after your scheduled end time. So if your start time happens to fall while that stopping strategy is being processed, then your schedule won't start. Non-repeating schedules are usually intended to be time sensitive. So if you have a non-repeating schedule to start, say at 10 o'clock, but your previously scheduled playlist is still playing due to the stopping strategy or lead out, it's not going to start. But then we get into repeating schedules, and they're a little bit different because they're scheduled to repeat over and over. Their start time isn't a hard start time. It's kind of like floating between the start and end time of the schedule. So it can start anytime in between. So when a schedule with a repeat strategy, stop gracefully, or repeat immediate, or any of the other repeat ones, not the no repeat. If it starts but a playlist is playing, the playlist with the repeating strategy, it will start as soon as the first playlist ends or upon the next iteration of the time interval if you have the interval repeat, as long as it falls within the scheduled time. So if you have a playlist that's playing and the stop strategy goes on beyond the stop time because of the stop strategy, but you have a schedule that's set to start at that same time, if it's set to repeat, it will basically be in hold waiting for the first one to complete its process. As soon as it completes, it will start. But that means that you have to have the repeat strategy set in there. But then priority scheduling adds another level of complexity on top of all of that. So do we have any questions about the basic part of scheduling so far? If you do, post them in chat. In Xschedule, you have the option to set brightness by props. Is this an option available in FPP Scheduler, or is this a different part of FPP? That I think Dan would be better to answer. I believe that you do have the option. You can remap by using remap. You should be able to.
Well, there are actually output processors for brightness and contrast and all those various things. So you would just select the channel ranges. Part of, I think, FPP5, we may be like, we're exposing various things from the models in other areas in FPP5. So like right now you would need to know the channel range of the prop that you're trying to adjust, and which is obviously not ideal. Obviously being able to select a prop name from a drop down would be better. It's just not there yet. And that's part of the things that's on my list of stuff to look at more for 5.
Okay, and then Chuck wanted to know what happens when schedules overlap. Is there a priority setting? Yes, there is, and that's what I'm getting ready to get into. I wanted to go over the basic part first. The next part is going to go about priorities. So priority scheduling adds another level of versatility to your scheduling. The way the priority is, items higher up on the list have a higher priority, and it'll preempt a schedule that is playing, but it will honor the stop strategy of the schedule that it's preempting. In Xschedule, I believe that you use a number system to identify which is higher or lower. In FPP, it's more visual. So if it's higher up on the list, like you see here in my static lights is the highest priority, then, and that's how it goes. So if you look at this schedule, I have a Halloween show, a Christmas show that plays a little bit longer on the weekends. And then after those shows, I have a static light playlist that plays until it starts to get daylight using the sunrise setting. But if you look, I have a potential problem here. I want my static lights to play after my nightly shows. And during the week, they end at 2200 hours. So I start my static show at 2200 hours. But on the weekends, my regular show runs until 2300 hours. Because the static lights has a higher priority, at 2200 hours, it's going to kick in. It's going to look at the stop strategy, which is graceful. So it'll finish the song that's playing, then play the lead out. But then my static lights will play, and that's going to preempt it. So it's not going to play. Oops. Because my static light schedule has a higher preempt, it's going to preempt it. Oh, let's see. I think that's it on that slide. So to fix it, all you have to do is drag that down. You can select an item. You can click on that item 1, and you can drag it down to where you need it. The advantage of using priority schedule is it simplifies your schedule, but you have to pay attention to your schedule order. You can also use wildcards, so you don't have to change your schedule year after year. Before priority scheduling, you have to start and stop each schedule so that they don't overlap. In the case of year-round landscape lighting, you might have to create several start and stop segments. So let's say you're going to have landscape lighting year-round, but then you'll have various holidays that you'll have shows for, such as Halloween to play from November 14th or October 14th, November 1st. After the show ends, then you return to your landscape lights to play. Then you have a Christmas show to start on Thanksgiving and end on January 1st. But for Christmas, you want to have a countdown playlist before the show, Then your Christmas show, you're going to have 2 different shows. Then after the show, instead of landscape lights, you're going to have static lights. And then later on in the year, you're going to have special holidays like Valentine's, etc. You can set those all up fairly simple by using priority so that you don't have to create a bunch of different segments. So you, excuse me, so your show might look something like this. We could have recreated a bunch of schedules for the landscape lights to start and stop to prevent overlaps, but this schedule simplifies things a bit. As you see, we only have one schedule line for the landscape lights. First, I want to point out how wildcards work. If you insert a series of zeros in place of any of the date fields, that'll create a wildcard indicating it is for every day, month, or year, depending on the wildcard you enter. For example, you could have a sequence play the first week of every month like this. So you see I entered 4 zeros for the year and for the date. And then I start on the 1st and end on the 7th. So every year, every month, it's going to play for the first 7 days. And the rest of it's just the same. You select your playlist, start, end time, and how you want the repeat interval and stop time. Okay, so let's get back to the schedule I had shown earlier because it has some problems. First thing is none of the schedules are set as active. So that could be a problem. Some people will enter it and not realize it'll default by active, but if you have it not set to active, then it's not going to play. The second thing is that the landscape light schedule is at the top, and like I mentioned, it has the highest priority, and it's going to trump all other schedules. So if you look at Halloween, it's scheduled to start at 20 minutes after sunset, and it'll actually start on Halloween at the scheduled time, but then the landscape light is scheduled 10 minutes later, and the Halloween schedule will perform the graceful stop, and then the landscape lights will kick in, which isn't what you want. You can fix this simply by moving the landscape light schedule to the bottom of the list because you want all other schedules to take priority over the landscape lights. So if you just move the landscape lights to the bottom of your list, then all the others are going to override it, which depending on what your priority is, that's what you'll have to select. The next thing that'll cause a problem is that the Christmas Day 1 schedule, if you see here, the Christmas Day 1 schedule has a repeat interval set to none because we only want it to play once, like I mentioned before. Like I mentioned before, if there's no repeat interval set, so it's set to none, the playlist will only start if there's no playlist playing at the time it's scheduled to start. But if you look at the countdown sequence, which is a higher priority, it's scheduled to end at 20 minutes after sunset. Christmas is set to start at 20 minutes after sunset, but the countdown has a graceful stop. So it really is not going to end at 20 minutes after sunset. It's going to be after some time. So it's not going to start because that graceful is going to complete. So this Christmas Day 1 probably will never play. So you could either move that higher up in the priority, change the repeat interval to 1 because you know that it's going to get through the time, but you just need to try and figure out how you want to make that play. You probably have to do some calculating on the time frames or whatever just to make it play you want. But just know that if with that being set to none, that it's probably not going to play. So, and then if you can change the order by dragging any of these items, you can click on it, drag it, and move it up or down, and that'll change the order. And like I said, the order is determined by where it is on the list. Higher up, it's got a higher priority. Okay, so do we have any questions on the priority part? Any questions in general? Because that pretty much covers everything about the FPP schedule. I know I went through it kind of quick. I think it was because I was used to the one before where I was trying to get through. So,
I just want to mention one thing you didn't. There are changes coming to the scheduler in FPP 5, which he did not. This presentation was specifically on FPP 4.6, which is awesome. But there are a few changes coming in 5. One of them being that you can schedule FPP commands directly, so or sequences directly, or things like so. There's certain things that you can schedule, not just playlists.
yeah, and because right now the way the schedule is set up is that you have to have a predefined playlist, which, like Dan mentioned, with 5, it's awesome that you can just select just an individual item, because some people will just play one item, so you don't have to have 10 playlists to play the ones individually. Chuck asked, how do I turn on or off a projector? That's going to depend on your projector, how you have it connected. You could, if you have it through a relay, you could use a GPIO FPP command. There's a projector plugin that you can use that they have that has scripts in it that'll turn it on or off. So it's going to depend on the projector and what its capabilities are.
In general, the FPP projector plugin is the place to start, though. You can select your projectors. There's like 50 some projectors that it supports, and you can select how it's connected. And for IP-based projectors, you can put the IP address and all that stuff in. It's definitely the place to start.
Yeah, and there's actually some default protocols that a lot of projectors support. So one of the default ones probably will work as well. Someone says, walk me through the steps in importing FSEQ and media to set up a playlist. The easiest way would be to use FPP Connect from Xlights. You select the FPP device, you select the sequence and then just select the media one, click upload, and it'll be done. If not, you can go into, you could do it manually through the file manager in FPP. The schedule priority stuff was added somewhat recently. I believe it was 4.5 or 4.6. It was not a total priority. It was more of a hierarchy, but the priority stuff, yes, was recently added to handle the full support.
I believe it was actually 4.4, but then it was buggy enough that it didn't work until 4.5.
Okay.
Or had issues, I should say.
Okay, so does odd even actually do odd or even dates or just alternate? No, it does not do actual odd even. And the reason it does not is because you have months that will end in an odd number. And then the first of the month by default obviously is odd. So you'd have the same show back to back. And some people kind of gets confused because they're saying, hey, it's an even day. Odd and even, actually, they started a timer when FPP was created, and then it's just the number of days from that date, so you get a true alternating schedule. If they did odd and even by calendar, then you could get back-to-back shows playing.
This is something I'd like to relook at, because I would, and it might happen for 5, because even odd kind of makes sense to be even and odd and then have a special alternating, like, so you could have specifically even like just separate settings between to differentiate two. But again, right now it is, as he said, it's based on some even an odd number of days from several years ago.
Yeah, even and odd, it does get confusing because I've seen people say, hey, it's even, but my odd schedule is playing.
Yeah.
So the terminology, yeah, can be a little confusing.
There was also a question about when is FPP 5 going to be released. Dan, if you want to comment on that.
That's a good question. Historically, we've been doing our first releases of the quote year summers around July or August. There's a few reasons for that. One is obviously the early part of the year where it's when it's in the heaviest development and things are changing rapidly and stuff. And so obviously it just makes sense to delay late enough that we can get the stuff in there, but early enough that people can start like using it for their Halloween shows and stuff. So generally August or early September is the right time frame for that. The other reason we generally delay is historically new versions of pies usually come out around June. And every time they've released a new version of a Raspberry Pi, it's involved new images to support that Pi. So whenever we try to do new releases before like then suddenly a new hardware comes out and you're scrambling to create all new releases anyway, based on new images, new kernels and all that stuff, just to support these new Pis. So in general, I would say like roughly around July or August is when we'd expect the 5.0 stuff to occur. That said, I definitely encourage people to flip over their FPP instances over to master now, which is where the development is going. Take a look. We are definitely open to criticism and ideas and things of you want to see. Again, we have a presentation in like 40 minutes now from Adam that I highly encourage people to look at just to kind of see what some of the stuff that's changing there. It's specifically on the UI level is what he'll be presenting. But there's a few other ideas there that we're working on. Like bridge mode is going to be completely handled differently, and like I said, scheduling commands and other sequences, and there's things going on. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, 5.0 is going to have some major changes that are actually pretty awesome. So, like he said, I'd recommend going over to it, especially if there's things that you want to see implemented, that you have ideas, and also to test things out, because usually people will install it right at the beginning of the season. And there's no way to test every single option that people can do. And it's great to have options for people testing every different scenario. So the sooner you get started, the sooner any potential bugs go. But I can tell you there's a lot of people testing it. So I really don't anticipate.
I mean, one good example that we're trying to track down right now, the whole scheduler has been kind of rewritten internally. And for some oddball reason, we're having issues on sunset schedules on Sundays, like only on Sundays. And so obviously it's kind of hard to reproduce because you can only reproduce it for like one exact minute every week, without doing some funky stuff with your time zones and things like that. But it's like getting the people that can test various scenarios and report weird issues like that are always a good thing. And some of them are just really, really hard to reproduce because obviously my time zone is very different than other people's, and so certain scheduling things like that just become more difficult.
We have about 7 minutes left, and I don't want to put Rick or Dan on the spot, but if either one of you can flip over, if you have 4.x running, can you just show them quickly how to get to master? If somebody wants to share their screen. I don't have any 4.6 available.
I don't either.
Actually, I do. Good.
Actually, I do have one, but I don't want to flip it because that's my only one left.
I'm still sharing, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so no, I don't want to do that one. Okay, so here's 4.6. To get to it, you go to FPP settings, change your UI to developer. Once you get here, you'll get the developer tab. You can select the developer, and then here select master. And that
it will take a long time.
Yeah.
Right. Go for coffee.
Yeah.
Go grab a bite to eat.
So that's how you get to the master. I posted in there, somebody asked about the process for uploading to the sequences to use. In the FPP manual, there's a section on FPP Connect. So I included that in there. Hopefully that helps. Oh yeah, and Greg mentioned about a lot of REST API additions. Yeah, the REST API section has been totally revamped. And it's going to create a lot more streamline, especially for people that want to create plugins or other issues.
Yeah, and those are advanced topics, just so, because I don't know what our mix is with the folks that are on the call. But
Do you have one of the fives up that you could poke at real quick?
What's that?
You have one of the FPP fives? Oh,
Yeah.
Just so a big difference.
It is. Where's it at? There we go.
Yeah, so it's different looking. Oh, you haven't done the initial setup.
Yeah, working on the manual.
Yeah.
Trying to anyway. You could.
Yeah, the FPP5 is completely new UI, and to support that, we needed to change a lot of things from direct PHP calls into REST APIs. And Greg has done an awesome job of finding all the areas in the old UI that was doing direct stuff and creating new REST APIs. Again, advanced topic, but it's kind of like the fundamentals for getting things moving towards FPP5.
the other nice thing about the other nice thing about the new UI is it's more mobile friendly for those of you that like to use, start and stop things off your phone or tablets. So
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention. Is there's been a lot of work on it to make it change formats based on the screen size and the resolution, so that it'll be a lot easier. There's still a lot of work going on in that, obviously, but they're doing a lot. But there's a lot of neat little features in there. Like if you hover over a lot of stuff, you can get some additional information. You can see the signal strength on your Wi-Fi. So there's a lot of neat functionality and stuff that's in here. So it's they've done a lot of work and a lot of enhancements and a lot of improvements on it.
The new UI, it's based on Bootstrap. For any of you guys that are familiar with UI framework things, or developer stuff. So like right now, we're concentrating on just getting the new UI up and running, and working on mobile and desktop type thing. There are certain things that are still issues like spacings and stuff like that, which we know about and we'll adjust as time goes by. But obviously having a nice framework there that we can base off of. We have some stretch goals of kind of making things a little bit more themable. So there was a question way up about putting a logo up in the corner or stuff like that. And there, maybe not for this year or for the initial 5.0 release, maybe like 5.2 or 5.3, we're hoping to be able to allow like some level of like plugin themes or something like that, just to allow some level of stuff of customization type things. But those are more down the road.
Yeah, and someone asked if the recommendation is to start the master to use master before the software is released. Yeah, I would highly recommend it. If you find that you're having problems, you could post in the FPP forum. Facebook isn't so good for posting, but it's okay, but people get you going. And if you have a problem, you can always go back to an earlier version right on that developer page. You won't lose any of your settings or anything like that. But it's real good if we could get people using it. So these little glitches that might be there, hopefully identify it. But I can tell you, the developers are really quick about getting things fixed.
That said, if you have a like critical show coming up, like I don't know, like a Mother's Day show that you really need to have 100% running properly and stuff like that, you might want to just stick with 4.6 for now. It's a matter of if it's controlling your landscaping or whatever, or you have just a general thing. Definitely, we'd appreciate any help we have testing.
Yeah, Debbie asking, should we start to convert now? I would recommend it, but unless like Dan said that if you got a critical show, maybe somebody's birthday party or something that is critical at this point, probably not. So that you can, test it out. But just for doing different stuff, and you don't have to actually have to have lights on it to see. So, just so we could test, like he said, there's that strange glitch with the Sunday every once in a while, and they only have one shot a week to test it to find out what the issue is. So Chuck Ackerman says that he's in, longtime X schedule guy. He's gonna try FPP, huh? What framework? They're using Bootstrap.
For those that are more familiar, we've been using jQuery UI for many years. And it's not really going to go away because we do use a lot of stuff from it. But finally moving away or over into Bootstrap kind of modernizes things quite a bit, or at least makes it easier to modernize.
So it looks like there's a lot of people that were longtime X schedule users going over to FPP.
And then coming up at the bottom of this hour, we have another session with Adam, who is one of the developers for the new UI, so for FPP 5.0. So we are kind of open-ended. We don't have anybody bumping up against this class right now, but we do need to give people a break for something to eat and then get ready for the class at the bottom of the hour. So if there are any more questions, or if there aren't any more questions, whoops.
Hey, you're in the matrix, Patrick.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to get out of it. Sponsor slide. Hang on. There we go. So I'd like to thank Dan and Rick, and then my silent co-host Kevin, who's been helping to watch the chat. Once again, this was the FPP Scheduler, brought to you by Bosco Studios, and Wired Watts was our sponsor.